Did you guys get the chance to go through both documents?
Yeah, sure did.
Cool.
Or,
I thought it was really cool because I'd never studied that much about Lance Armstrong, and I mean it's unfortunate what we had to read about him, but like it was really interesting because I was so young when all this happened.
mhm.
So it's kind of cool to like catch up on like little history parts of famous people that like are actually around from when I'm alive, you know?
Yeah, I remember like every kid in my school had those Live Strong bracelets. Like that was like a popular thing to have.
Did you have one?
Yeah.
Really? I never actually had one. I always wanted one, but I never did.
I
Those were
think
super popular. That's what like started that whole wristband trend. Is
yeah.
everyone knocked it off with random stuff, and then you would wear like 15 of them at the same time.
Yeah. I remember that too because Nike had like the swoosh on it, and then on the other side it had some sort of like word or something. But yeah, I remember people had like 20 on like one arm.
That seems like, or was it like junior high maybe?
I was in elementary school at the time when that was a big thing.
Yeah, man, that seems like it was such a long time ago, but it kind of really wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy what it became. I saw in the, sure we'll talk about it, but in the case it talked about that they sold 55 million units of it. I was like, dang,
Yeah.
a lot.
I believe it.
Who said that they were going to be late? Was it one of the Jessies?
Yeah, Jesse Spencer or Jesse Hill said he's booting his computer up. I haven't heard from Just Spencer, and Derek said he's going to be late. So we can give it another minute, or we can start whatever you guys want.
Well, might as well get started so we don't have to stay too much later.
Sounds good. So kind of a rough background. So we kind of talked about it a little bit, but Lance Armstrong. So starting out, he's definitely like a go-getter from the beginning, 5th grade and stuff, winning that race and learning of how athletic he was. And then as time went on, it became something so surreal to him and something where he had so much talent and he acted upon it. And for myself, I thought about that. I was like, dang, I'm long and lengthy, and there's a lot of things that I could have done, but I didn't act upon it. I mean, I'm not anything close to what he may have been, but the potential and the attitude Lance took to be able to actually achieve something so great was really cool. But then noticing that it got to his head a little bit later, you know, that it was a must that he had to be number one. He had to win. And in his interview with Oprah, at the end, it said something very similar to that, that it didn't say like he basically couldn't take no, but it was something along those lines that it was just meant for him to win everything. He couldn't stand not winning.
I think kind of go along with that too. I mean, it seems like a lot of people were doing kind of the same stuff with him, and so in order to actually stay competitive, you were almost forced to do that, which obviously doesn't make what he did, you know, okay. But it's
Yeah.
definitely tough when almost everybody's doing it. It's hard to because you want to stay, up there with them. You almost have to do it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because the whole time I was just thinking, I think it was A-Rod, Alex Rodriguez,
Yeah.
like another phenomenal baseball player, and he was doing drugs the whole time. Like I think there was another NFL or UFC fighter that was just about to fight for a championship, also steroids, and so it's like that's all over sports right now, and it is kind of interesting to see like a lot of the people who are doing it are top athletes, and perhaps they're doing it just to stay on top.
What was I know Sammy Sosa and Mark McGuire one year they were trying to like compete to have who had like the best home run record.
Yeah.
And they were both cheating. I mean, you had Sammy Sosa, he was taking roids and had a corked bat. You had Mark McGwire, who was taking steroids. And you had Barry Bonds, who he was also taking steroids, and he's got he's got the #1 record for home runs. So, you know, a lot of these guys, they just kind of cheated their way to the top.
Well, and also the thing about the Olympics, like especially China, they're pretty well known for using a lot of steroids and all that. I don't know if you guys follow basketball much, but if you remember Yao Ming, he was a Chinese prodigy for basketball.
Yeah, but Rockets.
And there's a rumor out there that, well, part of this is true, that the Chinese government found the 2 tallest Olympic athletes, which were his parents, and caused them to marry and have Yao Ming. And then throughout his entire life, like fed basketball into him and gave him testosterone and all this stuff to make him 7'6". So pretty crazy.
Wow. Yeah, I know. With the Russians, with the Olympics, I think they got like kicked out or banned, so they weren't able to compete under their own flag this year. But they had a Russian guy who was caught for, like, I think steroids or something for curling, and somebody was like, "Why would you need to take steroids for curling? Like, obviously you're pushing the thing, but like it can't be that heavy."
Mm-hmm. Well, especially like you think about Lance Armstrong. At one point in there, it said that he didn't produce lactic acid, which or as much. Like that alone, that's almost like, what do you need steroids for? Like that's probably the worst part of biking is the lactic acid building up.
Yeah.
The other thing, we were talking about the comparison of like the other people. So like his teammates, Hamilton and a couple of the other guys. Let's see if I can find his wording. I think you guys mentioned that it was just a part of the game. So Hamilton on page 11, top page, it said that I took the pill, like he didn't want to. He says, "I wish with all my heart that I'd been stronger." And thinking in a gospel aspect, like we hear those kind of words all the time. I wish I would never. Man, I wish I would have read my scriptures harder so I wouldn't have been tempted or whatever. But he goes on. He actually took it. I took the pill and it worked. I rode faster, felt better. For me, the only fact that mattered was that for 1,000 days I had been cheated out of my livelihood. And there was no sign that these things were going to get better. So I did what many others had done before me. I joined the Brotherhood. I was like, dang, dude. So there's a couple big things in there. Everyone's doing it. Why shouldn't I? And second, it's like, well, I kind of deserve this. I think he was, a skiing professional and got in an accident. And he's like, you know what? My life got screwed up and I'm going to fix it right now because I deserve to be #1. And I was like, that's so dumb that people kind of justify it like that, because I think it's cool that Lance Armstrong overcame all the cancer and everything, right?
Yeah.
But, like, if he were to go clean after that, man, that would mean so much more to me and a huge inspiration. Like, it'd be more motivating rather than saying, I deserve this because I'm going to take drugs or whatever.
Yeah.
I personally thought the more I read about him, the more disappointed I was in his character. Personally, especially like when he cornered. So, I mean, he wasn't even at the freaking dinner place with Hamilton and Aspen. I forget what page that was. But corners him and then basically just starts cussing at him, telling him he's a liar and all this crap. And it's like, and yet the whole time he's saying that he's a liar, but then he later admits that he was the liar. It's like, what the freak? Like, he actually went and cornered him.
Yeah, I thought that was a little weird too.
The other thing that's interesting is, so this is essentially like the pride of Europe, like they were saying, apart from soccer and something else, the Olympics. And I wonder if some of the other European teams were known to take steroids, but if they weren't, whatever, it's pretty disappointing that these guys are representing the U.S. and that they were caught with syringes and needles and it just makes the U.S. seem like a bunch of druggies that can't compete and have to cheat.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and especially like after all the fight, it kept talking like Armstrong was like tired of it. He just wanted the fight to go away because the French or the USADA was just like overruling him with all these reasonings and questions and these um, penalties or suspensions for 2 years. And dude, that'd be weighing like on me. Shoot, I would hate that too, but how embarrassing it'd be for a different country to be the one forcing that law against me, you know? It's a good point, Javier. Okay, so is there any questions about any of the background before we move to those questions, or anything that somebody wants to bring something up about the how you measure your life article?
No, I don't know about you guys, I think at least once a semester, one class will bring up this article. I've seen it so many times now.
I know. And sometimes in the same class, you'll see it twice, which is good. Like, I love the talk, but pretty long.
Have you guys read the book?
I haven't.
I actually just started it. You can get it as an audiobook through the BYU Idaho Library.
Uh-huh.
So you can Google how to figure that part out. But it's a pretty good book because, I mean, he's well known for the whole disruptor ideology. But the book is a lot about, like the title, how you're going to measure your life and how you're going to determine your success, which is pretty cool.
Great. He's a cool guy. I got to meet him on my mission. He was my Area 70 with Neil Anderson came, and I don't know, he had a really cool personality. So to me, he thought really out of the box, but it was so simple. Can't remember the other guy that was with him though. Very inspiring. So you said that you can get that on BYU Idaho Library?
Yeah, so if you type in BYU Overdrive, it'll take you can just make an account not even make an account, you just log in through your library. And I think they have it probably as an ebook, but the audiobook is pretty quick. I think they only have one copy right now, and I have it, so you have to wait for me to finish it.
Okay.
But then you can rent it out for like 14 days. You can also do it through all your libraries, which is pretty nice. So I've just been pounding audiobooks lately. It's great.
That's cool. Awesome. Thanks for telling me. Yeah, let us know when you're done, and
Yeah.
that'd be cool.
Actually, kind of interesting. You probably knew this, Dylan, but didn't Clayton Christensen also have cancer?
Yeah.
So maybe that's where they're trying to make the connection here.
Ooh, that's true. Yeah, let me pull it up. There was something that I really liked from this talk, actually, her book. Let me see if I find it. And Jess, did you get to read the Measure Your Life article too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So something that I found interesting was that in so many classes, it talks a lot about the breakup and the different target markets and segments, right? But it's neat that he goes down into allocating your resources as one of them and creating a culture. And the reason why I thought it was so powerful, relating it to Lance Armstrong's, is, hey, Lance, he created a culture, right? But he did it for the wrong reasons. And I thought it was really interesting because I never knew about the biking that you formed together. And I knew that you break the wind for the people behind you so they don't have to use as much energy. But I didn't know that it was a team effort in cycling with that many people to get it to where somebody can win. And So I thought it was cool that Armstrong kind of went into that and he found the best of the best, but unfortunately, the way he created his culture was for the wrong reasons of the illegal substances, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But when you relate it back to this article, the correct ways in obedience or the source of happiness and produced desired results that Christensen discusses, I think those are really cool to be able to be founded on. All right. Oh, go for it.
Nope, go ahead.
I was just going to get into the bullet points, but did you have something?
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
All right, so there's 7 different discussion points and questions, and the first one talks about what is Armstrong's legacy. So we kind of talked about it, but is there anything that you would add upon what his legacy really is?
It would have been cool. I mean, I'm sure you guys said this because I came in like 4 minutes late, but it would have been cool if he'd stayed clean and could have done even half of that. You know, half of what he did. It would have been awesome because then it would still be, oh man, Atlanta. Because I had a high school teacher who was a track person. Actually, she was not track. What's the long distance running one that they do every fall?
Cross country.
Yeah, cross country. She was a big old cross country buff, and she had Lance Armstrong all over in her room. You know, and I imagine that had he been, stayed clean through most of that, his legacy would have been one of, yeah, this dude was the man, but not.
So I've got a couple questions, and so if the problem is so many other people were doing it, do you think even if he stayed clean, people would still suspect that he did something? Because I know they do that like a lot of times, like the steroid era of baseball, they kind of throw everybody under the bus, say, oh well, they just assume that like, almost everybody did it. So do you think people would have just kind of assumed that he did it?
Totally.
I think people would have assumed, but you know what I mean, like. So let me give you. So for example, like, you think of. So I'll use someone in my that I know in the cutting industry, like the cutting horse industry, like almost every trainer there cheats on his wife or sleeps with his lopers, right? It's bad, and yet and so like a lot of people get thrown under the bus, just because they were around another person, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a guy I knew that he never did anything like that, but I'm sure he got thrown under the bus a couple times, but he never did. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I came to know him real well, and I knew that he didn't ever do anything like that, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately, while that's true, I think ultimately it would have proved out that, hey, look, nothing happened. Like, because I mean, honestly, like, no matter how hard you try to keep things covered up, it always comes out.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think if someone proved out, said, hey, he's obviously doping. First off, if he wasn't, yeah, his name might be, they might be tarnishing his name a little bit, but I think ultimately it would have come out that he was clean. Because you just can't go that long without getting caught. I just never seen anyone go and never get caught at something. I mean, even like, for example, in bookkeeping, there's a lady here in Idaho Falls that just got caught stealing money from the company she was doing bookkeeping for. So the only way they caught it was because she retired. And which, because they didn't have any internal control on their company. But anyways, she stole like $2.4 million from the company over her 15 years in the company.
How did they not catch that?
Because they never checked their bank statements. They never did.
Got good at hiding it. I mean,
she was good
without being good at it.
No, she was good at hiding it. But if you're doing like at least one thing like bank reconciliations, that would have helped. But they gave her everything. They gave her bank reconciliations. She had the books, and then she had access to all the checks. I mean, that's like the triple that's like the trifecta right there.
Yeah. It's like what you learn in accounting, like exactly what you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, even she who went her whole career and didn't ever get caught, right? I mean, she eventually got caught. She's age 65 now. She's gonna basically spend the rest of her life in prison because she's got a 20-year sentence, you know? So, you know what I'm saying? I don't see that you could go in both directions. You can't be clean and it come out after all those years of being clean off of every test that they can say truthfully and everyone believe it completely that, hey, this guy was cheating the whole time, because there was no cover-ups. There was, you know, it always comes out because it would always come out. That's my own personal opinion, though.
I think even so, more right now, good luck hiding any of this kind of stuff. Like with the prevalence of social media and everyone having their phones out, they would
that's true.
know where to keep secrets.
But I mean, and not only the social media, but like I feel like if it had happened, you know, within the last 5 years, even like, I mean, think about what the Sochi Olympics, that huge, you know, state-sponsored, you know, doping program that they had. I mean, it got found out pretty quickly, and then, you know, they had their consequences, and there were still even people doping now. I mean, I think, you know, social media combined with just improved medical science and kind of learning from the past, I mean, things are going to come out even quicker. And so, I mean, you know, to go back to the question of what's his legacy, it's almost, you know, the cautionary tale. You know, he was an amazing athlete regardless of if he hadn't, but there's always that kind of grain of salt or, you know, chip on the shoulder kind of thing to go along with his story, in my opinion.
I have a question. So, because you see, the whole case I was thinking, you know, it just seems like they come out with a new rule trying to stop some sort of doping scheme that someone else has come up with, and then within probably weeks or months, they got a new doping scheme. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so my question is because this is so pervasive, I would, you know, and let me preface it with this way, because if any of these guys were CFOs or CEOs, they right now would be spending 30 years in prison. You know what I'm saying? Because because that kind of fraud in any company would just, you know, that just earn you prison time. So I'm wondering, would it be better, like, because obviously they're trying to, the economic disincentives that they take away their championships from them and blah, blah, blah. But I'm wondering if maybe the thing to do is not just take their championships, but, you know, also on this, take some of their winnings, fine them, and then
stuff.
Yeah, and if they don't respond that way, give them like a 2 or 3 strike policy, and if it's so pervasive, like through their whole career, they find out at the end of their career like this, that they get jail time. Do you think that would be something that would help stop this pervasive culture?
I think it would, and they do something like that in the article. It talked about the strike system. So once they were told once, they got up to like 3 strikes, I believe, and then they were either kicked out. But I think if you went further and put them into jail time, yes, for sure, because this is illegal. You know, it's not just cheating; it's also harmful. You know, could you imagine the harm and health that it could cause somebody else that isn't used to this, and like someone on your team and just taking it for the first time, starting a race and then them dying over it?
Right.
You know, that is very dumb and crazy, but I think it should be prison time like you're talking, Jess.
I know, like baseball, I think they're more stricter than now. So you get like, not necessarily, you wouldn't get jail time, but you can get like lifetime bans from the actual sports. So I think that would help. If you like, almost like on strike 2, you get a lifetime ban, because that's like how you make money. So you're not going to want to like risk getting a lifetime ban, because then you lose you're basically your only source of income.
That makes sense to me. Has that proven effective? How long ago did they put that into place?
I know they don't have as much of an issue. I mean, you don't see when you had the steroid era in baseball, you would see home runs like all the time, and you don't see that very much anymore. So I'm sure it's helping. They definitely have gotten a lot more strict with it. They used to say like when they had drug tests coming up, they'd be like, "Oh, we're doing a drug test in like 2 weeks." So they would like notify them, or like they would tell them. They would actually give them set dates during the year of when they were going to do drug tests. I'm pretty sure. So it's like. And I don't know like how steroids work and stuff. It probably is obviously in your system for a while, but like it doesn't help when you tell them like when every test is going to be, and like they were pretty lenient about it. And then I think now they're far more strict. I think A-Rod was a great example of that, where he just kept getting caught over and over and over again. So he kind of ended up making it so they set stricter rules, because I know he got banned for like multiple seasons, but I don't think he ever got a lifetime ban. But I think that is definitely something they should do in every sport, because I just think it's totally unfair if like you're like a clean person and you just want to be able to leave a legacy. It's hard for you to like go into a sport where everybody's like doping or taking steroids, because it's like, well, I don't want my legacy to end poorly. Like I want to be able to be a good athlete, but I just can't be a good athlete, and I can't compete against people who are cheating. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something you just said, Kevin, just made me think of something. So have you guys ever heard of Farmore by chance? It's a company that was in the 80s that actually made Walmart kind of tremble in their boots for a little while.
Mm-mm.
They're actually, so they went IPO in, I think, 1990 or something like that. And
yeah, I was 3 years old. There's no way.
Yeah, I was one. I've heard, obviously, I guess I can't say, can you remember Farmore? Bear said, have you heard of it? But something that you were saying there, so I watched this documentary in one of my accounting classes about this company, and the auditors did something similar to what you're talking about with the drug tests, like notifying them 2 weeks in advance. So these auditors would notify Farmore, like which stores they were going to audit 3 months in advance. And so here Farmore's going under, like they have their $500 million deficit. Like they're fraudulently reporting $500 million.
Yeah.
And so what did they do? The first off, the auditors chose only 4 of their stores, and so Farmore takes off of all their shelves of their other stores and stuffs all 4 of these stores so they look immaculate. Like, everything's perfect to the T. Books look great, and
Yeah.
so and then a year later they do their IPO and then they go under like within months.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, just kind of like what you're saying, though, like letting them know way in advance. It's like even though, like you say, it could still be pervasive in the system, but you give them enough time, they can figure a way to get at least so it doesn't show up as easy,
Yeah.
Well, that's actually, it's interesting because in my what class was that just in? Oh gosh, I can't even. But it was in my my business law class. They're actually talking about. It's interesting that you brought up auditing, because they talked about how a lot of the what people see as the corruption with accountants and auditors, a lot of times starts with unconscious bias. People, because auditors are hired and in their words, hired and fired by the companies they audit. So there's a huge, subconscious and sometimes conscious pull to do that kind of thing, where it's like, hey man, just so we're gonna look at your books and the current system. And so what we were reading was basically an assessment by Harvard Business School, where they were looking at, how can we curtail this huge, well, not huge, but unfortunately prevalent culture of bias that leads to corrupt practices. And part of it was kind of an accountability, kind of like was talked about with like the steroids and the doping with other sports things. But they had some, this was, let's see, I think I said it was 2002. Some pretty, what I thought were good suggestions, but they deemed them radical. But a lot of things need to still change, because what happens is you get that pull of, hey, I can just do this, once or twice and it'll be okay, or I'll use their numbers, I didn't do it, kind of thing. Something slide bit by bit. And I mean, I imagine something to that measure happened with Armstrong. I mean, you don't just go from like 0 to 100 most of the time and say, yeah, I'm going to have this like extremely complex and immense effort to accomplish these things, and just because I want to look good and win. Like it starts little by little, and it's so interesting you brought up the auditing, because it's kind of everywhere, really, that little pull to not do what you're supposed to basically, because of what you can get away with even under the current law.
It's true.
Yeah. That goes a lot with the fourth and fifth question about like our own witnesses with uncomfortable situations, with what you said, like whether it's good or bad, well, what's the end result, right? So one situation that I had growing up in high school with lacrosse, there's a lot of team members that did drugs. So the coach, he actually was in the military, and 2 of his sons were on the team. And what the coach did is he brought 3 police officers and 2 of his buddies from the military. And we're like, what the heck is going on, right? So what they did is they ran us, because one of our practices, we screwed off a little bit too much, right? So the next practice was heck. They ran us and did crazy drills that sucked. Our practices were like 4.5 hours. And then in the middle of the practice, they lined us up and took us to the bathroom and did a drug test. And there's only like 2 or 3 Mormons on the team. And I was so happy. I was like, what? This is awesome. And we got drug tested, and there's actually 6 players that got arrested that night because of doing drugs.
Oh, that sucked.
Wow.
Right? We didn't see them again, but like it motivated us, and it put us in situations to be better leaders, and we ended up winning state that year because of becoming a better team. So it's like, for me, I feel that when you take a bad situation and you don't keep quiet about it, and you make it loud, kind of like with what Lamond did. Greg Lamond was kind of the 3-time winner before Lance Armstrong, and he didn't cheat or anything. And in his closing remark, he said he gets away with it because he's a cancer survivor. Like, dang, that's bold. Like that is almost like super rude. But do you guys have other experiences about a situation like that, and what were the results, or how did anyone object to it? Like, if you were in a situation where someone's going to jail for drugs.
Well, I actually have a situation just from like my high school, but it didn't really necessarily end like with like a good. There was like no good outcome to it, but there was an instance in our high school. We had almost our entire football team, and I never played football in high school, but everybody pretty much knew our entire football team was taking steroids. And my friend was on the team, and he's LDS, but he never took steroids, but his parents were in the stands, and they were talking to other parents about it. And even the parents were okay with it, because they're like, if it gets our kids into good colleges, like, that's fine. And it was just kind of like, it's sad to think about. And I just remember, because like these guys on our football team, they were huge, and they should not have been that big, especially for high schoolers. And these guys looked like grown, like
they looked like Lance Armstrong.
Yeah, they were huge, and so it was pretty obvious. But like, it's just kind of like our coach, like the coaches never did anything about it. the parents were okay with it, and it's just kind of like, to what, like, does it really matter? Like, none of them went pro. I think only a few of them went off to like an actual college and played football, and I'm sure they got caught there. So it's like, is it really worth it in the long run? And you're jeopardizing a kid's health, especially at that point in your life where it's like you're still maturing, and so that's like the worst time to take it because it can really mess you up. And so I don't know. It just kind of like I just don't think those parents ever really learned from it. But I think in the end, like my friend who was LDS, he never really got to start, but he just like he was like, it feels good to know that like you're not cheating to, and you're not having to like worry all the time about drug tests or anything like that. And he's like, it feels good to like have a clean conscience and know that you're not cheating
and not be someone you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting though. What you bring up though with the parents, it makes you wonder how much of it was the boys and how much of it was the culture the parents had too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
definitely.
how much of this was set by the parents?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to that how you measure life thing too, because he talks about that culture, right? And setting the cultural tone. And I think at least for the parents, setting the cultural tone, hey, we're going to get where we get by our ability and our acts alone. We're not going to cheat to get there. We're not going to try and finagle the system for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that, of course, that comes to the line. Where do you draw the line too?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, because, for example, like, I mean, and I know this is a little bit extreme on one end, but I'm trying to make a point, is like Gatorade. Like, Gatorade, it gives you some salt, puts salt back into your system when you're doing something like a triathlon or something. Like, and so you go, well, is Gatorade the line or is something else the line? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you define the line?
Yeah.
It's a good point.
Is that a question or?
Yeah, that is a question.
Oh, okay.
I think when, like, I've seen in marathons where they have water cups, and the only substance that you're given is water, but does that really stop somebody from taking something beforehand, So that's the hard part, because Lance said that he went through 500 drug tests and tested negative. Well, the whole time he got around it, and one part it said he drank a ton of water to hide it,
Yeah, I remember that part.
I think at one point, didn't they like pay somebody to keep something like hidden? Even like
Yeah.
the official.
I think it was.
That's a good question, Jess. So with those situations and those questions, one to add on top of it, a part of the discussion was with Armstrong's cheating program and his history about it. The question asked who suffered from his cheating and what was the cost. And knowing that his teammates Hamilton, Landis, and others who testified against him, the question was, are they loyal to him or not loyal enough? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think that phrase "not loyal enough" is kind of scary. At least in terms of to a specific person, because I mean, no matter what, a person's going to be flawed, and you got to be able to figure out where someone is wrong and where That's why, like, I don't hate Lance Armstrong, but I mean, I don't really idolize him. Like, I remember when it was like in the prime, like when he was like the big dog out there. And I mean, I don't know about cycling. I'm not even really an athlete. I did, football freshman year, 1 year in high school. But it was impressive to see him, and then to see him, find out everything what happened to him. You can take some of the good that he did, and see some of the, when he wasn't, which is who knows when, really, when he wasn't, and this part of this huge doping scheme, just to win. Because I mean, really, you don't do the things he did just for, like, how do I say, you don't do it for the good of yourself or anyone else. I mean, it's greed. I mean, he wanted, obviously, the attention, the fame, and everything. And so, not loyal enough is scary because it's suggesting that there could have been a point where they would have been so blindly loyal they would have swept anything under the rug. And I don't think that's really what loyalty means. Especially when you're this group of people that people have their eye on, like, oh man, like these guys are amazing, they do this, that, and the other, and like I can be like them, and then it's like, oh, just kidding. He was, faking it basically the whole time, and so I mean, I think they were just, I guess, in terms of the question, just loyal enough. I mean, obviously there could have been some things that they maybe could have spoken out sooner, but because I mean, like I thought it was interesting when the beginning where they list the questions, talking to Oprah Winfrey, and it's like, in your opinion, was it humanly possible to win the Tour de France without doping 7 times in a row? Armstrong himself says, not in my opinion. And so I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, just common sense, if you took the time and like, it is kind of like, you talk about, if you've taken statistics, you talk about anomalies and things that are outside the common range of just human abilities. It's just like, I think if someone had taken a little bit more care and maybe not been overly loyal to the image that he had built up, that maybe it wouldn't have gone on as long and been as pervasive. So the loyalty, I think, has become skewed, but that's kind of my take on it.
Interesting thought from my side is, anyways, my thought too is, when you talk about the loyalty, it's interesting when you were saying that, like, it reminded me of somewhere in the Book of Mormon, like it talks about how Satan is completely unloyal in the fact that, when things happen to his followers, he just lets them out to dry, right?
Throws them under the bus, yeah.
And so I was thinking about what you're saying here, and I was thinking, I'm not saying Lance Armstrong is of the devil, but I think everyone has a little bit of devil in themselves, and the fact that the natural man is devilish, all that stuff. And it's interesting that, when things started going down, like, for example, when Hamilton actually won, he won the race right before the Tour de France one year because, basically Armstrong kicked him off his team. And then here Hamilton's been pretty quote unquote loyal to him up to this point. And then what does Armstrong do? This guy's doping. He's obviously cheating because he shouldn't be winning against me. You know what I'm saying? And then later, he comes across, and like I said earlier, he comes into this dinner and totally takes him on there too. It's like, just left him out to dry, like these people may have been quote unquote loyal to him, but he just leaves them out to dry. And I think you're right, Jesse. I think loyalty is not that. I think loyalty is where you will stand by someone even to the point where you will actually stand up against them because it's for their better good.
Well, I mean, and you referenced the Book of Mormon. There's the I can't remember the names. I want to say it was like Corianton, but it was one of these huge battles were going on against the Lamanites and the Alma chapters. And the one guy, and I'm kicking myself for not remembering his name, but it's like he basically writes this scathing letter, like, it's because of like your unrighteousness that you're not sending the men to support us. And then the guy responds, is like, hey, just so you know, we're getting attacked too, but thanks for asking. It's exactly what you're saying. It's like loyalty doesn't mean just shutting up whenever it becomes convenient, for you and the person to benefit from it. It's, like you said, being willing to stand up to that person if it needs to happen. So that's a great point.
Yeah, and that and that was Moroni and Pahorn. I'm so glad I wasn't in Pahorn's situation, by the way.
Oh gosh.
Just thinking of that. I would have. I mean, you're looking at like, dude, Moroni was a stud, okay? So you're looking at. I mean, I'd be like, even though I know that he doesn't know what's going on, I'd still be like, I would be crawling in my skin.
So with that, the basic principles that guide us, I mean, with all of us being in the gospel, I'd say that the gospel is what guides us, right? And the principles thereof, and faith and hope and charity are a large amount of them. But are there other portions of your integrity as far as principles that help guide you to be honest in your daily livings? I guess, do you do it for you or do you do it for others? Typically, like, the reason why I feel that I choose to be honest is, yes, for myself, but more so for my family. You know, like, who do I represent? Or even for Christ, you know, who do I personally represent? And that's why I choose to have high standards in my integrity.
I could agree with you, Dylan. I think you can also compare it to when Clayton Christensen talking about, like, when they were reuniting and some people had become super successful and others had made a ton of money, and then some of these people, their families weren't around anymore. Maybe they'd gone into drugs or something like that. So I think I like to look forward a couple of years and think, you know, I want to be this kind of a person, and so what decisions do I need to make? And hopefully I'm a good person, so I'm not trying to make proactive decisions to cheat and steal and embezzle money. But it's like you said, like, it's also important about who you represent, and for us, you know, as priesthood holders, of leading our families towards that. And we don't want to be bad priesthood holders who are dishonest and cheating in the world.
Thanks.
I think, Dylan, also, like you said, and not like you said, but you pointed out one, like, do we do it for ourselves? Do we do it for others? And I think if we do it for ourselves, we'll ultimately fall, right? Because there's just too much of a tendency when it's for just you, if you're doing things for just you, which, by the way, never goes well in my mind. But if you do it just for you, you know, then there's no one holding you to it. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's nothing holding you steady, in a sense, you know, because you only represent yourself. You only think about yourself. So even if you're trying to think of long-term goals, like, you might think it's too easy getting trapped in the here and now if you're thinking just of you and representing only you, you know. And so I think you got a good point with you need to think, you need to do it for your family, you need to do it for the Lord, and so on and so forth, but definitely not for you, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
I think that just trips you up.
I mean, I think that's a big part of where, at least, you know, the culture of the United States is going. Is it's like, you know, it's the opposite of what you're saying. Is, you know, they live, you know, by everybody saying, you know, everybody have your own standard of, you know, what is, you know, good, what's, you know, what is deemed as, you know, being successful in life. And so it's like, you know, there is no, like, you know, there have been general authorities that have said, you know, over time, you know, society and the church have, you know, slowly diverged to now where there's this pretty big gulf in between what, you know, is deemed successful in society and the world versus, you know, what Christ and the gospel teaches us about, you know, what success really is. And, you know, a lot of times in my life and the choices I make and continue to make, I think of that phrase from the Proclamation of the Law and the Family, where it says, no failure outside the home will compensate for, no success outside the home will compensate for failure within. And so motivates my decisions pretty heavily, where I've already got 3 kids. And I think about, you know, what impact, you know, it might sound bad, but, you know, I'm not trying to portray myself as a terrible person, but I think about what would the consequences of my dishonest actions be on my family. And so, like I think it was Jesse that was saying, you know, having just your own little, you know, as the Christensen put, you know, the right yardstick. Sometimes we need that yardstick to come from elsewhere. It needs to be someone else, and that's the best one is obviously Christ and the gospel. But I think in a way, like for me, there's almost like mechanical principles to the gospel that have just kind of led into my life as from being a kid, of being honest and telling the truth, and not stealing. And I say mechanical because I almost think about them like a math problem. I look at it and say, okay, I can do this, but what's the mental consequence, emotional consequence, spiritual consequence, and the small little benefit, definitely is largely outweighed by any of the consequences that would come down the line, in terms of maybe legal or spiritual matters. And so I look at that, and so that's why I kind of joke with some of my friends. I'm like, oh, if I ever rob a bank, it's gonna be like a multi-million-dollar heist. And, I abscond to like the Caymans and live on my wealth, because I'm like, really, like you see these people like sticking up a store or a bank. I'm like, you made away with maybe a couple $1,000, and now you're swimming who knows how many years because of one bad decision. Well, I'm sure multiple, but so a lot of the gospel things have almost become mechanical now that they've lost a spiritual a presence in my life. But in terms of the question, I look at basic principles. For me, I was born in the church, came from the gospel, but they've also, like, I see the logic and why they're good principles to live by, because you avoid situations much more frequently, because being LDS, you're not going to not be in situations where you're presented with things that are bad to participate in, but having and living those principles are going to put you in a situation to say no and turn those things away. And so, the gospel in the spiritual sense, but also kind of, I guess, the temporal sense is one of the ways you really got to go and not just be like, I have my own yardstick and I'm going to do what I want, because, like Jesse said, that's where you get in trouble.
Yes. That's huge. And freak, if I had a good yardstick, I'd whack the devil off, So one question I've been talking about with my wife over this past weekend actually is one of the questions that were asked, and I am still finding different ways to answer it, and I'm super curious from you guys, because you guys all seem to have your head on straight. But how do you personally measure your life, and how do you measure success for you?
I mean,
well, go ahead.
I was going to say, as a parent, like I said, of 3 kids, like your perspective changed on what, for me, it has changed anyway, on what success is. I get so frustrated, when I see my kids, they're acting out, they're not behaving in church, and I just like, I look at other kids that are just sitting there playing with their little quiet books, and I'm just like mentally like slamming my fist on the table, like, why can't you just sit still? But then, we've had a few parent-teacher conferences with my oldest son, and like they said, he's a delight, like he's fantastic, like he's well behaved, and at the parent-teacher conference, I was like, no, you don't need to lie to me to make me feel better. Like, I want to know if my kid, like, locking up, is he loud, is he interrupting, like I was really expecting that, because he's a butt pusher at home, and then I'm like, no, he's fantastic, he's respectful, and so for me, seeing how my children interact with other people in the world is a huge measure of success for me. So at this point in my life, and there's one of my second right there. And knowing that I'm teaching the correct principles and how to kind to people, it's definitely one of those yardsticks that I have now to say, I'm at least doing something right with these kids. They're not turning out to be spoiled little hooligans that are just causing trouble everywhere.
Yeah, for me, I think the way I've come to measure my success is I don't have children yet, so can't go there. But for me, it's do I make my wife happy more often than not? I mean, obviously we can't be perfect, right? But yeah, I wish I could. I am. No, between that and then just if I can help someone along the way, it doesn't have to be like spiritual help per se, but if I got talent or something that maybe someone else maybe, and personally I really enjoy the youth, and so for me I play basketball pretty well, and I'm a pretty decent coach, and I'm not saying that in a bragging way. It's just I've kind of been gifted more that way than in other areas, And so if I find an opportunity where I see a kid that's got a lot of talent, I try and work with him and do something like that, and I find that to be where I feel a lot of success. Whereas if I, for example, training horses, like I worked for this one guy who was he was a legend, but I just couldn't believe what he could do with horses. He could take horses that I'd seen other people miserably fail with that were quote unquote excellent trainers, And so, and then comparing them against, and I think that's a real dangerous comparison, right? Because I used to compare and think, man, I'm never going to be this good. So ultimately I always felt like a failure. I mean, working for this guy. And so I guess the way I feel it now is, do I make my family happy? Do I influence the people that I can influence? And then as long as I'm not, and then I just try not to compare myself with others. And I think that's helped me feel successful, and that's what makes success in a sense.
Yeah.
I like it.
Thanks. Yeah, a big part of where I've seen myself be able to personally measure my life is in comparing with the covenants I make. So the 5 main covenants in the church and ordinances that go with them, and asking myself, hey, how am I doing along with this covenant? And especially at sacrament, I get to sit there and ponder about it, and the 3 promises I make with Christ and the return promises he makes with me. So I've tried to take it to not just spiritual measure, but also, hey, how am I doing, like you said, both Jesses, like with my wife or my future family. And the way that I measure that success is if I can explain to myself or other people what I've become and how I became it in a more righteous manner. And it doesn't have to just be spiritual manners or growth, but in an uplifting and positive way of what I've become from then. I think that's what I've done, but I want to incorporate your guys' ways more so, because I've been struggling on how to help others measure their life without being judgmental, because I get a little judgy sometimes.
I think we all do.
I think one of my favorite ways, like it's kind of like what you were talking about with the covenants, but in a little more basic form. It was I had a pretty nomadic life, but I remember I was living with an aunt and uncle, just working a job with my uncle, and I was in one of their gospel doctrine classes, and the teacher said, it doesn't really matter how far along on the journey you are, it matters what direction you're pointed. And so I mean, it's basically kind of a catchy version, of what you said. We've all made covenants of varying levels, and so we're all at different points in the journey, but it really matters where you're pointed, where you're heading. That's your various covenants and promises and situations are going to lead to kind of different yardsticks at different points in your life. But I really liked when he said that, and I think about it from time to time when I say, when I kind of get down and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I'm not successful in this. I get frustrated with my wife. I get frustrated with my kids, and I yell at them, and then not to like pat myself on the back, but I'm just I kind of inventory and say, okay, I'm keeping my covenants. I'm providing for my family. I'm not. We're not always as terrible as we think we are, but I mean, like I said, it's not how far along, but where your point is.
I'm glad I got this on recording. Thanks, Jess. That helps a ton.
Because I mean, you can have that inactive member that's been using drugs, but he makes the decision to come back to church, and he can get saved in the social kingdom just as much as someone that's been faithful for 80 years and dies with being completely loyal. It's just it's the parable of the worker. It doesn't matter when you repent and come do the work. It matters that you do it.
Totally. Wow, thanks for that. Hey guys, in closing, is there anything that you would add, whether it be the measurement, the integrity, or even from the case of Armstrong in closing? All right, well, good case tonight, guys. And is there any questions for the week for this class?
Hey, next week's mine, right? I'm up.
It's mine, I think.
Yeah, so Kevin is doing lesson 10, and then we don't have one for lesson 11, so then Jess Spencer has lesson 12.
Okay, good.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. I'll post this, and have a great week, guys.
Yeah, you too.
Hey, too. See ya.
All right, everybody.